Alright YouTube, so it was recently brought to my attention that Ruby Weapon is coming to Final Fantasy XIV in February 2020. Now all we have currently is just this image, but why it's cool to check things out like this is to get a vague idea of what these characters might look like when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Also, apparently Ultimate Weapon is already a part of this game, which is pretty cool. I don't know, I don't keep up with Final Fantasy XIV. Now this will just give us a general idea of what a modern version of these characters will look like. Obviously, when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, it has a completely different character designer than the remake. The remake is obviously Tetsuya Nomura, and if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to 14, it's Akihiko Yoshida. So when it comes to these two games, it's not a direct one-to-one comparison, because they're probably going to have different interpretations of what these characters look like in modern-day graphics. But still, it's something cool to look at. You can also look to a game like Mobius Final Fantasy to get an idea of what some of the characters from Final Fantasy VII are going to look like in the remake. Speaking of which, I've had these images of Lost Number and Diamond Weapon from Mobius Final Fantasy on my computer for a while now, because I wanted to do something with that. I wanted to take a look at some of the bosses from Final Fantasy VII in Mobius and get an idea of what they might look like when it comes to the remake. Actually, when it comes to Diamond Weapon, if you want a better idea of what he could look like when it comes to FF7 Remake, all you gotta do is check out Kingsglaive for Final Fantasy XV. Now, obviously, when it comes to the weapon enemies that we're talking about right now, this is not something that we should see with Final Fantasy VII Remake, the first game. It's something that we would see in either the second or third game. When it came to the original game, they're not even something we came across until Disc 2. In the original game, they get awoken from the North Crater after Sephiroth acquires the Black Materia. Obviously, the planet's in danger. They come out to protect it, and that's not something we're going to see for a long time. That's presumably like a third game or something. But again, it's still pretty cool to look at Final Fantasy XIV to get an idea of what they could look like in FF7 Remake. Now that all being said, however, there are two weapon enemies that we could possibly see with Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is not based off of any rumors or speculation. This isn't even really my thoughts. It's just something that could happen. We have, first of all, Jade Weapon from Before Crisis Final Fantasy VII. His weapon enemy that's awoken in Before Crisis with the summoning of Zirconiad. Obviously, the planet viewed him as a threat. After the Turks destroy Zirconiad, he begins hunting them because the planet views the Turks as a threat because they're powerful enough to destroy Zirconiad. So that would mean that Jade Weapon appears in the timeline of the Final Fantasy VII story, the universe or whatever, before the other weapons are awoken in the original story. Now obviously with the canon of Final Fantasy VII, he was destroyed in Before Crisis by the Turks, but we know that that doesn't actually matter because they've actually talked in the past about how the canon of the expanded universe might not match up with the remake because they might be taking things from, Before Crisis or Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus or whatever, and putting them in the remake if they wanted to. So they could potentially, if they wanted to, repurpose like Jade Weapon from Before Crisis as like a Superboss or something for Final Fantasy VII Remake. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind them doing this, because I don't give a shit really about Before Crisis. I've never played it before. It's a Japanese-only mobile game. It's not something we could experience without downloading like a ROM online or something. And the other one is Omega Weapon, and the only reason I'm mentioning him is because he's summoned over the ruins of Midgar. Dirge of Cerberus, the game that he's from, takes place 3 years after the story of the original Final Fantasy VII, a year after the Advent Children movie. Now, in the lore of Final Fantasy VII, he is the be-all, end-all weapon monster. When it comes to the weapon enemies that come out to protect the planet when it's in danger, Omega Weapon comes out whenever there's no other option. He's the self-destruct button. He comes out, sucks the planet dry of the live stream energy, and then flies off to a different planet. So him being in this game wouldn't make a lot of sense, but again, the canon of the expanded universe doesn't matter, right? It may not line up with the remake, so they could just repurpose him as a Superboss enemy for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Superbosses are something I'm very interested in when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, the first game, because it's the first game in this whole story, right? We didn't experience Superbosses until the second and third discs. But we've been told that the first game for Final Fantasy VII Remake is supposed to be like any other standalone Final Fantasy game. So to me that screams, for one, you can take characters from level 1 to 99 like any normal Final Fantasy, and when it comes to Final Fantasy, Superbosses are a series staple. Superbosses have existed in every single numbered entry from the original Final Fantasy on Nintendo all the way up to the modern Final Fantasy XV. Which, if that's anything to go by, should mean that the remake should have at least a Superboss, at least one Superboss for us to fight. As for what the Superboss could be, we've kind of already talked about some of them, but then there could be a brand new enemy concept, or there could be new weapon enemies, right? Some of the weapon enemies are named after stones. Jade Weapon, Sapphire Weapon, Ruby Weapon. There could just think of any other stone and add a weapon to it, and make it a new weapon enemy. This video became a completely different concept to what it initially was. We were literally just going to look at the Ruby Weapon image and the Mobius images and things like that, and just kind of talk about the potential of what he might look like in the remake. And this became a completely different topic about Superbosses as a whole, but it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. But if we're looking at the entirety of the Final Fantasy series, there has to be a Superboss in this game. There has to be. It's a series staple. So what is it going to be? And that's why I'm passing off to you guys in the comment section. What are your thoughts? What do you think the Superboss or Superbosses are going to be for Final Fantasy VII Remake? Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't new and want to stay updated with more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @TheDashingDavid. And my Discord links to my social networks are in the description. Into the outro. Later, guys.
Give me a smile, give me forever for a while, give me forever for a while. Quit acting like a baby, or at least less like